first up is the crisis. It's the border crisis. There's been an ongoing border crisis, whether or not the media wants to report on it, whether or not the government wants to acknowledge it, but there's been an ongoing border crisis with waves after waves of illegal aliens coming up into the border, taking advantage of our asylum laws that essentially allow you to cross the border, claim asylum. Essentially, you are let go while they wait to adjudicate your claims because they don't have enough capacity to keep you long. And if you're a family unit, more or less, they can only keep you 30 days or so. And then after that, you're free and clear in the sense that you're released, you're expected to show up, and of course, few people actually do show up. And even with their claims are adjudicated negatively, it's unlikely they'll be deported. In fact, if you cross the border, you're pretty much free and clear under current U.S. law and the way it's been implemented as a result of court intervention, liberal activist court intervention, and just the plain meaning of the law. And as a result, you have elements in Central America trying to take advantage of this and trying to break our system by creating and organizing a caravan of illegal aliens and others to target our border. And most dramatically, that's taking place now. It began seemingly in Honduras, went through Guatemala. Mexico pretended to try to cut them off for about 10 minutes, it seems, and then they burst through Mexico and are heading our way now. The numbers ranging from anywhere, I guess it started at 1,000 and went up and up and up to 4,000, then 7,000. Although I have a feeling that number will get smaller over time as it travels north in Mexico. But the threat to America won't dissipate over time because most of this group is men, are men. Small minority are children and women. So, of course, that's been the case with much of this, much of the assault on our border. It's basically young men, able-bodied, and it's few families. So the idea that it's women and children clamoring across our border is essentially a big lie. The numbers are not immaterial in terms of the actual issue that we're facing at the border. And as I said earlier, we put an investigative team in Guatemala to investigate what's going on, to figure out how this caravan was organized, and what can be done about it. And to that end, we sent Chris Farrell, who you may have seen on other Judicial Watch videos. He's director of our Investigations and Research Department, and Irene Garcia, who's one of our long-standing employees who writes our Corruption Chronicles blog. She's based in Florida and excellent Spanish speaker, so she's a great resource for stories like this. And so we sent Irene and Chris down to Guatemala, and guess who they met up with down there? Coincidentally, I guess not coincidentally, because Sarah Carter is an intrepid reporter herself, but the great Sarah Carter, who you've seen, I'm sure, on Fox News, on Sean Hannity and elsewhere. So Sarah is also a Spanish speaker. So they linked up with government sources in Guatemala. Chris, Irene, and Sarah went down to the border region that Guatemala shares with Honduras to investigate what was going on there. And they ran into, and of course we have the exclusive reporting on our Judicial Watch website, they ran into essentially hundreds of men ranging in age from 17 to 40. They're rowdy, they're angry. Their perception was many of them were criminals, and this is not a refugee caravan in any traditional sense of the word. That's for sure. The Guatemalan authorities, according to Chris and Irene, are stretched thin. You can imagine, Guatemala, Honduras, El Salvador, they just don't have competent governments or resources, even if the governments were competent, to be able to turn back organized caravans like this. And I say they are organized because that's what Chris and Irene discovered when they're down there. They are asking people what's drawing them, and they're saying it's jobs, not politics. All the lines are rehearsed. And they're saying it's not organized, even as there are people with directing where to go in Spanish in and around the caravan. So this is a significant issue because there are a lot of people who, they could be, it doesn't matter what their sex is, male, female, child, or otherwise. This is a dangerous journey. It's a massive human smuggling operation, human trafficking operation. It places everyone in the caravan at risk. And of course, in the caravan aren't just poor people seeking a better life, as if that's a reason to break our laws. It isn't. It includes immigrants or aliens from other countries outside of Central and South America. We understand Bangladesh, Angola, Cuba, other places like that have been pulled aside by Guatemalan authorities, and of course they can only pull over, they can only do so much in terms of enforcement there. So the concern as well, based on what the president of Guatemala had said a few weeks ago, and we know this generally, is that Guatemala is a way station for terrorist types coming, targeting this part of the world. Over the last 2 years or so, they had arrested 100 terrorists associated with ISIS, many folks associated with Syria. So it's a dangerous situation where you've got this wild, wild west mentality in terms of organizing massive amounts of people all at once to go and hit our border. And as I said, it's designed to break our system. Now our system, as I point out, is already broken in the sense there are waves currently of, they don't call them caravans, but they might as well, 500, 1,000 people a day are coming into our border region. So what, 4,000 come up in 2 or 3 weeks, assuming they get up here? It's just a degree of, it's just a difference in order of magnitude, not of kind, of the ongoing crisis we have in the border. So this is, and of course it's Judicial Watch down there telling the truth about this. The media is still pretending this is some sort of organic, spontaneous caravan, which is just absurd because Guatemalan authorities have said to us that, look, it's organized. There are places where there is food, rest points where there's food, water, and medical care. Chris and Irene, they had scored an interview with the president of Guatemala, Morales, and he said, let me see where he said. President Morales said Guatemala has absorbed the huge cost of mobilizing police and the military to return thousands of people to Honduras. He would like the United States to help him find the organizers of the caravan so they can face legal consequences. As I said, this is a human trafficking operation. Violations of not only United States law, potentially, but I guarantee you the laws in which the countries they're going through, like Guatemala and probably Mexico, if Mexico wanted to enforce the law. Mass immigration like this endangers lives, Morales said. This is unprecedented. We are in the process of investigating who's behind the caravan. And then Morales says, Guatemala is doing everything they can to stop the caravans from moving forward. But as I pointed out, their resources are lacking in that regard. So it's organized and it's directed at the United States. So what is it we do in response to this? First of all, we need to recognize the threat. It isn't just economic migrants the way the left would have you believe. As one headline we have points out, elaborately planned caravan brings human traffickers and violent gangbangers to Guatemala. Another headline from our Corruption Chronicles blog based on our reporting from Guatemala. Young angry men and gangbangers march towards U.S. yelling, "Vamos para a la Trump." Here we come Trump, I think that's how it translates. Our folks were down in, as I said, southern Guatemala, a town called Chiquimula. It's about 35 miles from the Honduran border, and they encountered 600 men, as I said, that age range of 17 to 40, and they were marching north. And one was someone who had been deported. Others were and as I said, there were these seemingly organized chants taking place saying, "We are coming, Trump." All the migrants said that they were, it was spontaneous. Of course, what would they say? That we're organized? Even as they were organized, they were shouting instructions in Spanish, and get this, putting select people in front of the news media. So it wasn't like these folks were just standing around. No, the organizers were actually putting forward spokespeople from the Caravan. We've got to take a strong stand here. I've talked about the potential national security threat, the threat to the public safety. Many of these folks or too many of them are you can bet, are criminals. And of course, the fact they want to come here illegally shows that they want to commit crimes, because to cross the border illegally, in many cases, would be a crime. So what to do? Now, I've been advocating placing the military. The president has threatened to place the military at the border. I think he should go a step further. I don't know how placing the military at the border is necessarily going to solve the issue unless the president is literally willing to literally close the border, prevent anyone from crossing the border, and frankly, unless you're an American citizen. There's no foreigner who has a right to cross the Mexican border. Just shut it down. Otherwise, he needs to interdict, I would recommend, this caravan. As I said, there's humanitarian issues and national security issues and rule of law issues and protecting our sovereignty issues. So I think that's good reason to deploy the military to protect our interests. And if it means sending them into Mexico and demanding that Mexico let our folks go in there unmolested to interdict and stop and turn around this caravan, that's what should be done. Another step, which may be easier to take in terms of preventing future caravans from forming, is to send troops into Guatemala. Chris was down there, as I said, Chris and Irene were down there, and the thinking is it's just putting, I guess, the equivalent of peacekeepers in place in Guatemala that can provide logistical support, medical support, surveillance support, civil affairs support, would free up Guatemalan resources, government resources, to go and better police the border and allow them to really put a surge of their own down on their border with Honduras and perhaps El Salvador to turn away and stop any other caravans from forming and coming north. But we've got to have a creative mindset in terms of dealing with this problem. The asylum laws, as I pointed out, have been abused in a way to allow virtually everyone crossing the border at Mexico to say asylum, and as I say, they get put in a system, and it's essentially it's the equivalent of just a free get into the United States card, and it's rare. It's almost impossible to deport you once you're here. So that may require Congress to change the law. It may also require the president to pull out of the international treaties, as Mark Krikorian has highlighted in a piece he has out this week. Mark Krikorian from the Center for Immigration Studies. This whole asylum regime is a result of an international treaty the United States signed on to, but we didn't sign on to an international treaty that would have turned these asylum claims into a right every supposed non-citizen of the world has to try to get into and stay in the United States. We all know what a legitimate asylum claim might look like. You don't have to be an expert in immigration law. You know what it means. It means if you're a persecuted minority in a country, or you're targeted because specifically, personally and individually because of your political beliefs. But the idea that because you live in a country where there may be a little too much violence or economic hardship makes you subject to getting asylum, I mean, that's absurd. That means asylum means nothing, and our borders mean nothing if that's the rule. But unfortunately, it is the rule, and that's why we have these caravans being organized to take advantage. And I tell you, if they get to the border, they will get through. I tell you again, if they get to the border, they will get through. So everything you see the administration doing, which would be fair, to try to solidify and bolster the border, which is always good to do, caravans or no, aren't going to stop necessarily these folks from crossing the border. Now, there's some news out there that President Trump is considering another form of a travel ban that would prohibit effectively these folks from seeking asylum. I don't know how that will work, My guess is the courts will try to intervene, and I don't know if they'd be successful in the long run in terms of stopping such a travel ban from at the southern border from being implemented, given the Supreme Court decision earlier this year that reaffirmed the president's right under the law to close our borders to entire classes of immigrants based on concerns he has about national security and other issues. But it doesn't mean the courts won't try to subvert the rules there. So it's a real crisis. And of course, Congress needs to act. Congress doesn't want to act. Where is the Republican leadership here? They still control Congress. They see this crisis emerging in Mexico. Why isn't there emergency sessions of Congress to try to deal with this clear present danger to our sovereignty? I think it's fair to ask your members of Congress, why aren't they doing anything? I mean, if you ask them to do amnesty, they could be all over it. But you ask them to secure the border, it's a big yawn. They don't want to do it. So I don't envy the president. He doesn't have too many good choices here. He has some hard choices to make, but those hard choices, as I pointed out, would be in the best interest of the country if I think he follows the types of things that we've been talking about here. So I encourage you to go to Judicial Watch's website, our YouTube channel, and our other various social media platforms to see all the reporting we've done on Guatemala, because no one else has done it. See all the reporting on the Caravans. Go to my tweet feed where I've talked about some of the things I've learned from the reporting as it was taking place. As I said, it looks like there are organized groups down there, outsiders organizing these caravans. We suspect Americans are behind it as well. We're investigating that for sure, but don't believe it that this is organic. It's planned and it's calculated to undermine the United States of America. And the president is within his rights to deploy the military as appropriate, close the border, and otherwise take executive action, lawful executive action, as opposed to the executive action that President Obama used to specialize in to defend our sovereignty and defend the American people.